The wind at the understrata level of Narration didn't just blow. It hunted. It cut through thermal layers and bit into the bone, a reminder that while the floating city hung 10 kilometers above the storm layer, the bottom decks were only a few rusted plates away from the abyss. Orion Vale zipped his slate-gray longcoat to the chin. He walked with the measured pace of a man who used to fly reconnaissance craft into war zones and now mapped wind currents for a city that didn't care he existed. That suited him. Anonymity was a warm blanket. But tonight, the shadows of the maintenance causeway held something other than debris. He stopped. Near a venting grill, huddled against the vibration of a support pillar, were shapes, not refuse but life. A face lifted. Large, pale eyes glowed with the faint, bioluminescent green of moss light. The woman's skin was a cool, iridescent verdant tone, her white hair matted and damp. She stared at him, unblinking, protective. Beside her was a younger woman, nearly identical but softer, and between them 2 children, girls with skin the color of hunger gray ash. They weren't crying. They were too empty for that. Orion kept his hands visible, his voice low. "I'm Orion. I work the archives. Are you injured?" "I am Salira," the older woman said, her voice trembling but rigid with dignity. She nodded to the younger one. "Navin and our daughters Eral and Kani." "What happened?" "We were dancers for the House of Ares. Our patron left the city. The house closed. We have been locked out for a week." Orion felt the familiar tightening in his jaw. The upper decks pretended Narration was a utopia, while the understrata collected the debris of broken promises. Salira lifted her chin, clutching a frayed ceremonial sash of green silk. "Feed our children, human. Keep them warm tonight, and we will give you a gift no man has been given." Orion didn't ask what the gift was. He pulled ration bars from his coat, cracked the seal on one to show it was safe, and handed them over. The children lunged not with greed, but with the terrifying focus of starvation. "My loft is 3 decks up," Orion said, the decision made before his logic could protest. "The floor is heated." "What will you want from us?" Salira asked, eyes narrowing. "Nothing. Come." The elevator ride was a vertical shot through the strata, from the freezing dark to the glittering, suspended glass of Deck 34. Inside his loft, the warmth hit them like a physical weight. The space was minimalist, matte black and chrome, overlooking the churning gray ocean of clouds miles below. While the girls collapsed onto the heated floor panels, devouring instant broth, the mothers stood guard. They scanned the room for cameras, for traps, old reflexes of the owned. "You offered something," Orion said, watching the steam rise from the kettle. "You don't need to." "It is our vow," Salira said, her voice steel hard. "If you feed us, you earn the right to anchor us. 2 sisters, 1 husband. Without a patron, without an anchor, we are erased by the system. We drift until we die." Orion turned. They weren't offering a favor, they were offering a surrender of their autonomy in exchange for survival. "Not tonight. You're exhausted and terrified. I'm not going to take advantage of that." Navin let out a shaky, disbelief-filled laugh. "No man has ever said that to us. I'm not most men." He kept watch while they slept. He sat in the chair by the window, a sentinel against the silence, watching the rise and fall of their breathing. He knew the protocol required him to report them. He knew the city would separate them by morning. And he knew, with the absolute clarity of a pilot committing to a dive, that he wasn't going to let that happen. At dawn, while the city cycle was still powering up, Orion sat at his console. His fingers flew across the holographic interface, bypassing firewalls he hadn't touched since his military days. He didn't just log them, he embedded them. He falsified 4 dependent tags, linking Salira, Navin, and the girls to his own biometric ID. When Salira woke, she found him standing by the window, the data stream fading. "It's done," he said quietly. "You're in the system. Ration access, heat credits medical, hidden under my profile as cultural retainers." Salira stared, her composure cracking for a fraction of a second. "You risk your position? Why?" "Because I've seen too many people fall through the cracks," Orion said. "I didn't bring you here to watch you starve under a different roof." "Then you understand." She stepped closer, the morning light catching the teal freckles on her collarbone. "We will not be a secret. If you take us in, we are not guests. We are family, or we are nothing." Orion looked at them, Navin waking up, the girls blinking in the sun. He felt the solitude of the last 3 years shatter. Then it's family. That night, the dynamic shifted. The loft was no longer a shelter, it was a threshold. Salira and Navin approached him as the terrace lights blinked out. This wasn't submission, it was a reclaiming of self. Navin moved first, sliding Orion's coat from his shoulders, her hands warm and trembling on his chest. Salara followed, untying the tattered silk from her hips, letting it pool on the floor like fallen leaves. "We do not drift," Salara whispered, her eyes locking onto his. "We anchor." They moved to the alcove bed, a tangle of limbs and intent. It was a rhythmic, desperate collision of life against the void. Navin was soft urgency, her breath hitching as she kissed him, needing to feel his reality. Salara was power and precision, her body enveloping him, claiming him with a fierce, possessive gravity. Orion held them both, one arm around Navin's waist, the other gripping Salara's hip, grounding them as the heat rose. It was an act of defiance against the cold city outside. Salara's nails dug into his shoulders, her head thrown back, white hair spilling like moonlight across his chest as she shattered. Navin buried her face in his neck, whispering broken affirmations. For the first time in years, Orion wasn't guarding anything. He was holding it. The next morning, the loft hummed with a different frequency. The silence was gone, replaced by the soft thud of small feet and the clinking of cups. Caney was wearing one of Orion's shirts, laughing as she slid across the floor panels. Iral was organizing utensils, a tiny scout making order of her world. Orion made breakfast, real food, not rations. As they ate, Salara watched him, the tension finally bleeding from her shoulders. "The registry is active," Orion announced, sliding a datapad across the table. "The girls are listed as my wards, you are listed as my wives. Permanent status." Navin froze, bread halfway to her mouth. "Wives? It's the only way the system can't erase you," Orion said, his voice level. "You aren't passing through. This is your home. I accept the vow." Salara stood slowly. She walked to him, her movements royal, stripped of fear. She placed a palm flat over his heart. Navin joined her, placing her hand over her sister S. "Then we are no longer ghosts," Salara said, a small, rare smile touching her lips. "No," Orion covered their hands with his own, feeling the steady beat of 3 lives suddenly, irrevocably intertwined. "You're anchored." Outside, the wind howled against the glass, searching for things to freeze, but inside, the air was warm, and for the first time, the city felt steady beneath his feet.